So, I've been playing the Sword and Shield Isle of Armor DLC lately, and honestly it's pretty cool. But while I was busy catching fast pokes and getting beat the shit out of by buffaloes, I started thinking, and we all know how dangerous that is. I love Pokemon. It is easily one of my favorite franchises of all times, and I've been in love with it ever since I snuck into our storage room to secretly play Pokemon Sapphire months before it was supposed to be given to me as a birthday gift. Sorry mom, better luck next time. However, like literally every Pokemon fan in existence, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the franchise as a whole. With every game, I can't help but feel that the Pokemon Company and Game Freak rarely capitalize on the potential the series and its various settings present. The biggest sticking point for me personally, however, is how the games always manage to feel smaller than they actually are. Let me explain. In pretty much every game, we are presented with a lush and beautiful environment, a rich setting with tons of potential, only to be railroaded through it on a linear story that pushes us from one dialogue to the next. Sun and Moon were the most infamous cases of this, with continuous and unrelenting hand-holding and an absolute fear of letting the player do literally anything besides following the gripping narrative. And even Sword and Shield, two games that I really love, go fuck yourself, suffer from this issue in a different way. While Swoosh definitely tried being more open with the inclusion of a semi-open world of the wild area, it quickly runs into a problem. To truly explore the wild area, of which there is only one that you find early on in your adventure, you need to keep coming back to it. However, the game keeps pushing you forward into new areas and story beats, which means you have to actively choose to reject the game's directions and backtrack in order to do some exploring. This is a huge pace breaker and disrupts the flow of the game, but it's obviously what you're supposed to do. The wild area was a huge part of marketing and development. Because of stuff like this, Pokemon games end up feeling a lot smaller and more restrictive than they really are. They include, after all, hundreds of critters and multiple lush environments. But because the game design doesn't take advantage of that and basically just forces you to go through in the most linear way possible, it often ends up being kinda pointless. And this is where this video's title comes in. I think that Pokemon needs side quests. Side quests are at this point a staple of RPGs and even other genres. Shorter, optional missions that branch off from the main narrative and can range from small inconsequential happenings to full-on subplots. If you have ever played literally any game from the last few years, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Side quests in video games are honestly a brilliant idea. They can, when done properly, allow for reprieve from the main plot, flesh out a game's locations, people or themes, and offer variety in subject and action. They are a spice. They are the spice to be added to the gaming stew, and one that most games can benefit from. Pokemon has dabbled with the idea of side quests before, but, like with everything else this godforsaken franchise does, it just couldn't commit to it properly. So all we got were Pokédex checks, trading NPCs, and maybe a post-game mission that's basically just the epilogue to the main plot. And while this DLC actually also tried bringing in some extra activities, like collecting 150 digletts, Jesus, it's reasonable to say that we have never gotten a true side quest system in a Pokemon game. And that is a fucking shame. Because the world of Pokemon really lends itself to this. With a big focus on how Pokemon and the world around them harmonize, and a variety of ways in which this harmonization happens, side quests could be a fantastic way to show the various ways in which the Pokemon world works in tandem with its curious inhabitants. It would be an objective world-building positive. Additionally, Pokemon's storyline is, well, relatively basic, so distractions and additional side plots could help bulk up the experience. Not to mention that Pokemon's basic storyline actually ironically works for itself, because it makes it perfect for side questing because it avoids a pitfall that many other games with side quests struggle with: urgency. Games like Skyrim or Fallout 4 have literal ass mountains worth of side quests, but their inclusion actually ends up conflicting with the main story. In Skyrim, you're rushing to save the world from an imminent apocalypse, and in Fallout, you're on a frenzied search for your missing son. The idea that, in either games, your character would have the time to build settlements or catch butterflies is an inherent clash with the game's narrative context, which can be off-turning to some. Pokemon circumvents that potential issue by default, since the League Challenge has little to no urgency. Outside of the third act, where the evil team's machinations kick into overdrive, all Pokemon games don't really care about imposing narrative time limits or urgency on the player. The League challenges never mention to have a time limit, and while we are occasionally told to give it our all, we're very rarely told to hurry up. That is a perfect framing for potential side quests. Now, another important part of side quests is of course the rewards. World building and variation is cool and all, but if in the end all you get is a wet handshake, it's hard to remain interested. Now, if only Pokemon had some quantity of gameplay relevant collectibles of varying rarity that could feel rewarding to find. I am 23 now, I've been playing Pokemon for like 15 years, and I have never in my life legitimately caught a Celebi. In their infinite wisdom, the Pokemon Company decided to completely abandon and isolate a vast majority of critters they had Game Freak painstakingly create, leaving them as either unobtainable or event-only Pokemon. Instead of doing that, which is stupid, why not integrate them into the game, for example as rewards for side quest systems? The current state of Mythicals doesn't make them feel special, it makes them feel pointless. You just download them whenever Game Freak runs an event and boom, you got it, probably at level 100. Side quests will be an excellent way of tying them into the game and make getting them an actual act of gameplay rather than just looking up the event dates on Celebi. Or hell, even aside from Mythicals, rare and strong Pokemon could also be given as quest rewards, not necessarily just handed to you, but for example have their areas unlocked after a side quest. The little Diglett hunt in the Isle of Armor gives us a glimpse at that. You collect 150 Alolan Diglett and in return you get a bunch of Alolan form Pokemon. It's tedious and kinda stupid, but it is a step in the direction I would prefer. Imagine that we now restructure this quest. Instead of collecting 150 Digletts at once, we collect them in batches of 15, with each complete batch triggering the Digger guy, calling you up and telling you that, thanks to your help, he has been able to track the movements of the Diglett and ask you to meet him somewhere else, where he has determined the next 15 Diglett to be. So instead of a frantic run across the massive isle itself with no real direction, you get bite-sized little adventures that take you on digestible trips around the island without feeling too tedious. 15 at a time is a lot more palatable a number than 150 at once. After you do this enough times, you eventually track the Diglett to a newly unlocked area where now all the Alolan Pokemon that in the actual game are just given to you by the Digger are now catchable, maybe even with higher chances at IVs, EVs, hidden abilities, or even shinies. This way, the side quest doesn't just awkwardly hand you a handful of rare Pokemon with barely any connection to the gameplay, but rather it makes you track and search together with your partner, culminating in the find of a new area where Alolan forms gather. Ideally, you'd also get a lore reason as to why they do that. For example, there could be something that makes this area feel like Alola. Or maybe this area houses a rogue totem Pokemon from Alola that has been rallying its Alolan brethren. Or maybe even you find out that this area is now under control of the mythical Alolan Marshadow. My point is that, by putting in a bit more thought, this tedious minigame from the DLC could be transformed into a compelling side activity that takes you across the island, asks of you to be investigative without overwhelming you, and rewards you with a new playground filled with strong and rare catches and maybe a unique reward. Seeing Pokemon roam freely is one of the greatest joys of Sword and Shield after all, so unlocking a new area by itself is a bit of a reward, giving that area increased chances for good spawns and just a general spawn chance of Pokemon that you couldn't have found any other way is a good reward which would justify these sorts of side activities. Obviously, overhauling a single side quest like this isn't where it should end. The next games, if they want to include side quests, need to be built from the ground to accommodate such a system. So, I thought I would have a little suggestion. With Sword and Shield, the idea of the Pokemon Professor became slightly more relevant, with our rival Hop wanting to become one at the end of the game. So, and this is a free idea for you Game Freak if you're watching, I propose for a game in which that idea is further built upon with the Pokemon Research Institute, a facility that researches and studies Pokemon and that constitutes as an international hub that educates Pokemon professors, essentially the International Pokemon Academy or something. Whatever region or story that would be relevant this time around, the player could find this place early in the game and agree to help them out. This institute would then become a continuous resource of side quests removed from the main plot. A village reported sightings of a rare colored Nidoking. Go investigate, talk to the townsfolk, and earn yourself a shiny blue Nidoking. Or maybe the researchers are planning an expedition into a bewitched forest said to house the mythical Celebi, but need a strong, battle-experienced trainer to defend them. Voila, you're their guy, provided you're strong enough, of course. This institute could also be a way to introduce, explain, and access EVs and IVs for the casual player, with maybe a research report indicating areas with higher chance of Pokemon with high values, and perhaps some resident professors explaining these things to you and explaining to you how you should go about finding and catching them. This video isn't by any means a catch-all solution to the many issues that plague the Pokemon franchise, and I'm not gonna pretend that my suggestions aren't without flaws. But I am a rando YouTuber with no background in game design, and I think I managed to come up with ideas that, at the very least, sound more interesting than Pokemon's average output as of this time. So hopefully, we will eventually have the experienced team over at Game Freak construct effective and rewarding side quests that truly elevate the Pokemon world up to its potential splendor. And maybe, just maybe, they use some concepts that are similar to what I laid out here today. Thank you so much for watching. My channel is kind of at a crossroads between anime and gaming right now, so let me know if you like this little excursion by liking and subscribing, ringing the bell, or maybe even supporting me on Patreon. Link in the description. Take care and be safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.